to the Fit Veteran podcast. I have Sydney Decker here. Sydney has put out a book, and this episode is going to be covering basically turning your pain into power. So she has a very powerful story, and she wants to pour into the veteran community and teach you guys, with PTSD, with depression, with anxiety, all those things that we have, like how to overcome those, how to turn those into a source of power, and basically share with you her story and why she's literally probably one of the best people to speak about these things. So welcome, Sydney. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about turning pain into power and share my story. And like I was telling you, this is like a very serendipitous coincidence day, as my uncle was a veteran and today's his birthday. So I wanted to mention that because I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was your uncle's name?
Brian Covert.
Brian. Happy birthday, Brian. That's great to hear. Cool. Well, let's cover a little bit of your story. So, there's a lot to unpack there, I'm sure, and I know you're pretty much like an open book. So you're gonna basically just share with us with everything that's on in your life. So I know you have suffered depression, anxiety, probably some PTSD too, with kind of everything that unfolded in your life. So I'll let you tell it because you're not going to tell it. You're going to be the best one to tell it. So go ahead.
Yeah. So my journey, I would say around like 13, things really set in for me for being really dark. I was really anxious and depressed. I grew up in a home with my father struggled with alcoholism. I don't like to call it an alcoholic because then that you kind of, I feel like you can get out of certain things. It's just how you use your language. So, because he really did try a lot growing up too, of going to rehab, getting sober, and then that cycle and stuff. So that's why I called struggled with alcoholism. And so growing up in that created some just like emotional issues for me. When you have a parent who's like in and out, it starts to create this emotional insecurity and unsafety because this person is supposed to be taking care of you. And sometimes they're there and they're very present, and other times they're not. So it's like, and they can't communicate why they're not, because especially when it comes to substance, especially with alcohol, you slur your speech, you're not very cognizant of what you're doing or your behaviors or how you're behaving in front of like your children and stuff like that. So it would create like some dissonance within my emotional regulation. So by 13, basically, is when all of that really starts to build up. And you can start to see it too, because when we're teenagers and we start to turn, our hormones start to change and our body starts to change. And that's when our emotions really amp up anyways. So I really had a lot of difficulty going to school. I had a lot of anxiety, depression. I had agoraphobia, which is like the fear of leaving your house. So I couldn't even leave my house for extended periods of time. And it got really bad when I was 16. That's when the suicidal thoughts really started to take over. And I was suicidal a lot of the time. And I was actually hospitalized when I was in high school for a little bit because of my suicidal thoughts. And I couldn't go to school. I was having anxiety attacks all the time. And I honestly thought that like this was going to be forever. Like I really thought like I couldn't see out of it. I couldn't see even where it came from or why it was happening. I kind of felt very disempowered and I felt very lost in the darkness. And so even within that, like a lot of my family talks about like, we don't know how you did it. You graduated school and then you went to college and you moved away. And so I still ended up I'm like smart, you know what I mean? It was my emotional regulation that I was having a hard time. And it wasn't my mental, like I could do the school work. It was the energy that I was being subjected to at school. It was around my peers. It was, at this point, my father had moved across the country to Arizona. So I was just feeling kind of like not so great about that. And my mom was sick too. And so there was just so much that was going on emotionally that I felt like I couldn't show up to my life but I knew that I had to at least get my schoolwork done to do my schoolwork. So eventually I graduated, but the anxiety, depression, agoraphobia, all of that stuff still followed me into college. And in college is when things got really intense, because it was in college that I actually attempted to take my own life. So before, I had a plan, and then I was kind of like, that was found out about. And so I decided, well, my parents put me into a hospital and everything. But when college, I actually ended up doing the actual act. I was really sick for a while. And it was after that, trying, because it didn't work, thank God. And it was after that that I started to wake up to something different. And that it actually is interesting, because I don't really share this, but for some reason it's like telling me that it's like okay to share on this. So when I went to take my own life, because I don't want to like encourage people to do anything, so I don't like to tell people how I did it or anything, because I just don't think, but I was in the hospital basically, and I was unconscious, and I was sleeping at this time, but I just remember having this dream basically. And in this dream, I was in my hospital bed, and this guy came into my hospital room, and he was like, "Hi, like I'm a counselor. I was sent here to talk to you. Like we understand what it is that you've done. And so we just want to kind of really figure out why it is that you did those things and what it is that caused you to do that. And so I really just want to talk to you about your life. I want to like see what's been going on for you." And so I start talking to this counselor, and I'm just telling him everything. And just from the start, from like when I was born to this, to what happened, to just all the stuff I just kind of mentioned, the depression, the anxiety, school, my father, those types of things. And I get to a point, and we're having a great time, actually. This guy's making me laugh, like he's cracking jokes. We're like noticing things, like seeing things that I didn't notice in my life that were actually positive and good. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And like he was like pointing those things out to me. And then I get to a point, and I remember, and I look over at him because he was sitting across at this chair. And I look over at him, I said, "You know what? Thank you. I want to live." And he goes, "Wow, great. That is so great to hear." He's like, "Okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to get water. Do you need water?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I'll take a cup of water." He was like, "Okay, well, I'll be right back. It's just so great to hear that you want to live." He walks out of the room. I wake up, and now I'm in a hospital bed, and it's dark, and there's no one, and there's not even the chair over there, because I looked over at the chair and the chair wasn't there, but my mom is sitting next to me. And I look over, and I'm like groggy, like I'm not doing well. And I look over, and I'm like, "Where'd the guy go?" And my mom's like, "What guy?" And I was like, "The guy that was sitting here talking to me for hours." And she goes, "There's not been any guy. It's only been me for hours." And then that I fell asleep. I had to like recover, do all that stuff. But after I got to a space where I was like clear again, the only thing that stuck out to me was that conversation that I had and that dream that I had, because I realized it was obviously a dream. And it was then that I realized, like maybe talking about this stuff and maybe really looking at this stuff is the answer, like rather than resisting it, avoiding it, pretending it's not there, like still going through the status quo, trying to do all the things, like what if I actually like sat with it? What if I actually got to know it? What if I talked about it? And so that led me to finding this book on gratitude. And I read the whole entire book. It's called The Magic by Rhonda Bryn. It's really good. I highly recommend it. It kind of takes you through 28-day journey of gratitude. And it was after that that I started to realize like I can change my life around by my thoughts. I can actually start to change my energy, the dominant energy that I'm holding, by practicing other things and engaging in those things. And engaging in the gratitude led me to that, which led me to meditation, which then led me to doing yoga, which then led me to Ayurveda, which led me to writing this book, to like my practice, to all these different things. And so it was in that dark moment that I found my light. And it was that I believe that the universe was trying to show me that if you can do this, so many other people can do this. Because like I said, I never thought I would ever be able to get out of the dark place that I was. And that's why I chose what I did. And I would never recommend that now. I would say, come and call me first. Let's talk.
Yeah. Man, that's pretty heavy, and I appreciate you being open about all that. Like that's crazy. So my first question is like, what is your take on the guy that talked to you for like 2 hours? Like, do you feel like that was you in your mind helping you through that, coming across as like somebody else? Do you feel like it was like spiritual, like it was somebody sent to you? Like what's your take on that?
So I feel like, I mean, now where I'm at in my spiritual, I'm a very spiritual person. I actually would say I'm a spiritual being having a human experience more than I'm a human being having a spiritual experience. That's kind of how I see my life right now. But so it's deepened for me. But at that time, I saw it as a guardian angel. I felt like it was like someone was looking out for me. And because my whole life, I've been very sensitive to things like that too. I'm a very sensitive person. I take in energy around me. I've always been that way. And so I feel like that was at the time, I equated it to it's a guardian angel because I've seen angels before, I've seen ghosts, I've seen different
Mm,
things.
wow.
And so now I look at it though, and where my understanding is that there really is only us here. You know what I'm saying? It's like there are guardian angels and stuff, but in order for us to connect to them, it's through our internal world anyways. It's not necessarily always an external thing. So it is a part of me as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And so with we have basically, I don't know if you heard of the statistic of the 22 veterans that take their life every single year, suffering from PTSD. Yeah. So they got like a 22 push-up challenge. It was really big, like maybe 5 years ago on Facebook. Like everybody, oh, I challenge this person to just bring awareness to veteran suicide. So like, I mean, the statistics crazy. Like we're losing more veterans and we're losing military personnel in the war zones. So what would your advice be to a veteran? And I've actually had a few buddies that I served with that come back and they're not here anymore, right? Because of suicide. So it's very real. Um, what would your advice be to like those veterans going through those hard times, the PTSD? They're thinking about, taking their own life. Maybe they've tried already. Like, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, first and foremost, I'll start with this. Um, I had my father actually committed suicide, took his own life in 2014. So, yeah, that was almost 9 years ago. And he wasn't a veteran or anything, but he was a man living in a very patriarchally masculine dominated world. And so I want to bring that up because I've really looked at his pain and his suffering and why it seems like a lot of times it's more men doing it than women. Not to say that women aren't doing it, it's just that it's on the rise with men. So I was really looking at that. And when you were saying, especially with veterans, what came up to me is when you get trained, and you can correct me if I'm wrong too, because I was not trained in the military or anything. I just know based on certain people in my family and just reading and certain things. But when you get trained by the military, you basically get reprogrammed to go over there and do what it is that they want you to do. So you're almost like a robot. You're not seen as a human being. And so you have to do some horrible things too in certain ways that you have to first and foremost it's you got to find a reason for doing it, so your purpose is to protect my country, so that's what you're given, that's why you're doing these things, right? You're told this is your purpose. So you no longer are told that you matter as a human being anymore. You only matter to protect your country. And so that drives that force for you. But then there's something that goes on in your brain that starts to say, like, I'm not a human anymore. And you start to slowly close off your heart and you start to shrink that and tighten that, because how can you do a lot of the things that you're doing and have an open heart, especially when you are going over there and you're being told there's an enemy, and you can't have an open heart with an enemy. That's the enemy. So you have to close your heart, do what you need to do, fulfill your purpose, and take care of that enemy. And so what that starts to do is that starts to lead your mind starts to lead, the mental body starts to lead, and then that emotional component of the heart is closed, very limited, and then the heart is also the portal to the soul. So then your soul purpose starts to diminish. So then you are really only operating from one, well, physically, but from one body, well, two, physical and mental. And the mental body, like if you know when human beings are born, right, like we're kind of like sponges. The mental body only knows what it's programmed to do. So you were programmed to do a specific thing while you're over there doing your purpose, whatever, protecting your country. So that's how I started to see it for men, and how it's you're basically told to close off your heart. And we grow up in a society, even if you're not military, that you're told as men at a certain age to start closing off your heart. So it just kind of adds to that. So when you go over, like, because we're in America, so like for example, like my uncle, he went over to Iraq, he did 2 tours, and so he had to leave, and when he came back, he was a different person. Like he wasn't, it would took a really long time for us to get to his heart and to have his laugh back and who his humanness was. And he felt very misplaced. He felt very lost. There's a lot of things that while you're over there, you can't process because it's just a lot's going on. So you just have to keep going and moving forward. And so he lost a lot of people, saw a lot of people die in front of him. And so when he came back, even listening to like fireworks, he had to put headphones on. He couldn't even listen to fireworks. Hunting season, forget it. Like he would lose it for then too. It just was like, so I could just see his nervous system was always wired, looking around, trying to keep himself safe. And so it took a while for us to get to having, like I said, his laugh and his humanness come back. So to go back to answer your question, it's that closing down of the heart space, and it's the only operating from the mental body that starts to leave people to feel like there is no purpose and that there's nothing I can do. And I've seen these awful things. And you don't even want to tell the people that you love what you've seen or what you've done or what you've heard, because then that makes you have to live it. And then that makes you have to open up your humanness and open up your heart and recognize that should we even be hurting each other like this? It starts to ask those questions, and it's, yes, you did a purpose and you fulfilled a purpose and there was something great in that, but now you have to open up to experience that pain, and you can't get beyond that pain. So what my advice is to definitely get involved in something like somatic breathing, stretching, moving, and helping your body to open back up again, to start to move that out, because a lot of it's getting stored in your tissue systems. A lot of it's getting stored in your nervous system based on what you've seen, how you're in that fight or flight type of place. And then coming back, this is, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't had the experience, but you feel isolated because you were programmed to act a certain way and do a certain thing. And now here you are and your family's telling you that they love you and all these things. And you're not programmed to accept that yet. You're just looking out and like not able to connect. And so then they'll get mad, right? And then they're like, what's wrong with you? Why is this happening? And then you feel even more isolated because now that you're back, that brotherhood is gone. The camaraderie is gone. You don't have the people around you that you had that understood you, that were like, keep going, man, you got this. Like, and yeah, you can text each other and call each other, but it's not the same. You were on an adventure. You bonded with those people. There was something in that it's hard for you to escape from completely when you come back too. So I like to let people know that the mental body is only one part, and that all the things that you've seen and everything that you're stuck in is a program. That if we start to open up your heart, yes, you're going to have to process through some of those emotions. But once you are able to do that, that heart portal will open and your soul purpose will come through again. And you can come through that darkness when your soul purpose gets activated, because now we can find a purpose for you. So I think a lot of veterans find life purposeless too. It's like, well, what else? What do I do? Because now you're coming back, you got to find a regular job. Now you're just dealing with this. I mean, it's not great being a citizen either, like the struggle too. And then you just went and defended your country and now you got to struggle to like fit in back. Like, why aren't they helping you? Like, why isn't there more support? That's one thing that I would ask all the time, because I did so much, and now it's like, here I am, I got to go work at Dunkin' Donuts. That's not really cool, you know? So
Yeah.
it's that also creates more stress. So you're stuck in that fight or flight even more, and then you're dealing with those heavy burdens that you've been carrying too. So really, it's finding ways to get like massages, like letting your body get to a state of relaxation, inviting the parasympathetic nervous system to become active again, not just the sympathetic fight or flight. And then finding a therapist. I know that it's not like a big thing, like it's going to be hard to talk about, but finding someone who can understand the PTSD, who can just give you that space to just speak. Because a lot of it is just hearing the story, just letting yourself say it out loud. And then finding someone who can help you understand the emotions, and finding someone who makes you feel safe enough that you can express those emotions and not be judged for them. And then that will help you to regulate and start to feel normal. It's a long
Yeah.
answer,
No,
but
I mean, you hit it on the head. Like if I didn't know any better, I would think you were like, we're working with veterans every day just by like everything that you explained. Like you were spot on with so much of that. And it's like we do struggle getting back into the civilian lifestyle, and we do basically have to just start over because we're trained to, most of us, not everybody, but most of us are trained to go to battle and kill people essentially, right? And these are the things ingrained in us from day one. I still remember my combat instructor saying, like who wants to be the first one with the who wants to be the first with the first confirmed kill, like
mm,
on their block, right? And it's like at first we're kind of like, yeah, and then by the end of it, everybody's like, fuck yeah, it's like,
mm-hmm,
so like you do get programmed, you get programmed to do, and we're all getting programmed one way or the other, right? Like,
mm-hmm,
yeah, I run a business, I got 12 employees, and it's like I'm programming them to do essentially what I want and lead our mission in the right direction, right? And it's not like uh malintentioned programming. It's just like, hey, these are our core values, this is what we stand by. If you don't stand by this, or if you don't know these core values, like you got to go, type of thing, right? So
mm-hmm.
everybody wants to do a good job at whatever they're doing. So, and in the military, it's combat, right? So
Yeah.
um but I think you're 100% right with what you said. The um kind of solutions are, or the ways that we can deal with it. So the massages are huge because it is very hard for military people to relax. Like
Yeah.
we're just not wired that way. Like and like me personally, like I can't take naps during the day. Like if I take a nap, I feel like I'm just wasting time. I'm worthless. Like
Mm,
and so like to go get a massage, like you talked about, it's really hard sometimes. And I do get massages from time to time. I don't get them all the time, but it takes a good 10-15 minutes to really just like, okay, let everything go and just relax and all of that. And then with the therapy, is like, therapy's so huge, guys. Like anybody listen to this, if you have these issues and you're not seeking therapy, like she talked about, you got to go do it, because it's just going to be able to allow you to get things off your chest. It's going to have somebody there that's not going to be, judging you. I think therapy with other people too is really good. So with a parent, with a spouse, maybe it's a sibling, like you guys, somebody that's just going to be that middle person. Like, okay, I'm not on anybody's team. You guys can each say your piece, but we're going to do this respectfully and do it the right way, because then you start understanding how other people feel. You start understanding your own feelings, which is almost more important, right? Why
mm-hmm.
do I feel like this? Why does this trigger me? That type of thing. So yeah, I thought that was, I mean, I think you nailed it. So it's definitely, I forgot to mention this. You have a bachelor's degree in psychology, so it definitely showed right there. I kind of butchered your introduction. I meant to say that in the intro.
No
But
worries.
yeah, it makes sense now. Um, so if you would, you have something that you use as like a tool. I'm not even 100% sure what it is. Can you explain what the Aerovada? I probably butchered that. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, it's called Ayurveda. And
Ayurveda, sorry.
it is a holistic healing science, and it's translates to mean the science of life. So it is 5,000-year-old ancient healing medicine, actually the very first ancient healing medicine that human beings practiced ever. And that a lot of things like Chinese medicine comes from, even Western medicine comes from, and surgery. It's actually the very first surgeon was an Ayurvedic doctor. So it's really, really cool. It's originated in India. That's where its birthplace is, but it's just the science of life, and it's everywhere. And basically, this really helped me to wake up to my power in so many ways, because it takes healing and it gives it back to you. So it's not like I need to go to someone and they're going to give me a pill and then I'll be better. Or it's like a lot of times when I was growing up, I was on a lot of different medications, and for like anxiety, depression, all that stuff. And it just never really worked for me. It just felt like I was numb. They couldn't get the dosages right. I would sleep a lot or not sleep. It just never felt right. And I never felt like it was my brain. It felt like something was controlling my brain. And that made me feel even more anxious, weirdly, because I was like, why do I have to rely on this thing? Like, I just want to be okay. So after my father passed away, I graduated from Duquesne and I was working in the psychology field, but I found that there was this place in Pittsburgh at the time, the Ayurveda Center, and I was like, this sounds amazing. I've always been into holistic healing. I've always been into Reiki, yoga, meditation. Like I said, I started doing the gratitude and the yoga and the meditation, and I was like, this is basically what this Ayurveda teaches you is the way to go to heal and to get back to knowing who you are. And so Ayurveda breaks down the human body into 5 elements: air, space, fire, water, and earth, and how these combine into several different energies. So there's 3 energy systems: Vata, which is air and space; Pitta, which is fire and water; and then earth, which is water and earth. And how if you look at the cell and you look at the body and how it functions, you can see this. So like breathing, wind. If you sneeze, wind. I mean, gas, burping, that's wind. Your neural net pathways, how things communicate, that's wind. Like any type of movement in the body is going to be more of like that flow and that wind, that's vata. Then the fire is going to be like our eyesight, like you can actually see that it fires to create the light to see. Our digestive system, our metabolism, that's going to be fire. And you can actually get things like acid reflux, that's fire, like that's coming through. And then water is going to be like our spinal fluid, like sinuses, like like you can actually see like we're made of water too, so there's a lot of water in our body. And then our bone structure is earth, so like our bones, our muscles, our physical body is made of like earth. We basically, in order to be in this realm, which is a realm, the earthly plane, we have to be made of the substance in which the earth is made of in order to be in this realm. So we're not, and that's also another thing that Ayurveda teaches, is we are not outside of nature. We are very much a part of nature, and everything is interconnected. And the human being suffers the most when it finds itself separate from nature, and it destroys its environment more when it finds itself separate too, which you look around, right? So that is where Ayurveda has taught me that, because it focuses on the cellular health of a human body. So I started to see like how certain foods, certain energies, certain behaviors would create a energy and would start to operate in that way. And I would start to operate in that way of that energy. So it started to teach me that what is my basic blueprint? So everyone has their basic elemental blueprint. For me, it's fire and earth. So if I was eating a lot of like heavy, greasy foods, I would feel even more lethargic, because heavy, greasy foods is actually going to create more earth element in your body because it's heavy. So it started to make me realize like the qualities rather than quantity, the quality of life. And not only the quality of life, the energetics of life, and how those qualities find their way in the world and the human body, all these things. So like heavy, light, cloudy, foggy, like that type of stuff. And how that is very much like certain times I wake up, I have brain fog, I feel foggy. I'm like, foggy's outside in the world too. So like, this is interesting, like, how do I clear this? Like, how do I take care of this? So it just really started to help me understand, like, once I found my blueprint, because that's what an Ayurveda practitioner does, it helps you find what your element, your mind body type. So how your body works together with how your mind works with your body based on the elements. So for example, someone who's has a lot of fire, they're going to be someone who is the leader, the go-getter, wants to be number one on the top, competitive. That you think of fire, it's like fire, I got the fire in me. If you meet someone who's got more air element, they're going to kind of be like airy a little bit. They're going to want to go here and then they're there and then they're hungry and then they're not sure. Like that's
Like a
kind of like an
tumbleweed or
airy.
something.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. And then if you
I got
meet someone that's got a lot of earth element, they're the person that's like a little bit heavier. They move a little bit slower. They like to kind of relax, sit on the couch more than out going and runs and that type of stuff. So
you.
I started to see the world through the Ayurveda perspective, and it made the most sense to me. And then I started to apply the tools, which is oil massages, herbs, getting to know who I am, meditation, getting to know consciousness. And that's what big thing for me was getting more mindful and more conscious. Because when I became more mindful and conscious, I actually could start to see my mental body and how my mental body was only operating based on my traumas, my triggers, my pains, and my patterns. And that's not me. Those are traumas, triggers, pains, and patterns. Who I am is the person who's witnessing all of those things happening. And so that created an anchor for me. And that created something of like, well, how do I want to feel? Right? Like, what type of qualities do I want in my life? If I'm someone who's going to be sitting on the couch, but also a go-getter, what type of job is going to be the best for me? Like what type of activities am I going to do? Like I started to like see myself and like get curious about myself and actually want to get to know myself, not based on like who your mom wants you to be or who your dad wants you to be or who your country wants you to be or any of those things. It was like, who am I? And I really started to ask that question. And so that's what Ayurveda really helped me to do. And so now that's what I help people to do. So if you came to see me for Ayurveda, I make a whole wellness report, diet, nutrition, lifestyle, self-care practices. I recommend bodywork treatments because I do Ayurvedic bodywork. So Ayurvedic bodywork is different than massage too. So it's more focused on calming the nervous system, like I was talking about, rather than deep pressure. It's like bringing your system into alignment, allowing your mind and body to come to that centered space, allowing you to actually rest and relax, and then that your body starts to heal and repair itself. So Ayurveda is all about the environments, the qualities, and creating that space for you to heal yourself. So that's also another thing is like, if anyone comes in to work with me, I say, I'm your guide, I'm your support, and I'm going to help you. I will not heal you. I can't heal you. Only you can heal yourself, but I'm there every step of the way. So that's what Ayurveda did for me, and that's how I help people with Ayurveda.
Okay. And you have like a brick and mortar business, like where you do this at, or is this like okay? Because yeah, I thought I saw that on your website. I also saw like an 8-week type program or something. Now, is that in person? Is that online? Like, how does that work?
So my 8-week program can be in person or virtually. So I have people like right now I have a client that's in New York. I have a client that was in Oregon. I have a client that's in California, Texas, like different places, especially for the 8-week program. That can be done anywhere. And that's why I created it that way. For the first 4 weeks, it's called To Step Into Self, Turning Your Pain into Power. And it's something that I did for myself too. So it's not like it's like it seems like a lot, but it's like I did it for myself first. So the first 4 weeks we focus on your mental body. So that's recognizing what I just kind of stated, like what are your pain, what are your triggers, what are your behaviors, what are your patterns, like all those things. We really start to see it as something that's not like, because if all the lights are off in your house and you're hearing noise, you're like scared, right? Because you can't see anything. So let's turn the light on and let's just see what's been making noise. And then what we find is it's the cat in the closet, right? And it actually loves you. You know what I'm saying? Like it can be something like that. So we just look at it. So we start to work with the mental body for the first 4 weeks, and that we do go into shadow work. So what shadow work is looking at your shadow. Really, this is where if you work with me, you got to do work. You got to journal, you got to do the meditations, you got to bring your questions, you got to answer the questions, even if it's like small, like for one example, like for the first week, one of the questions is what emotion do you avoid the most? Just write down at least one emotion. You don't have to give me a whole paragraph, but what emotion do you avoid the most? Because then I can help you expand on that when I see you, because you meet with me once a week for those 8 weeks.
Uh,
Then after the first 4 weeks, we go into another set of 4 weeks, which is that's when we're going in and we're working with your inner child and we're working on the heart body. And
mm,
so the inner child lives in the heart. So that's when we start to, more people start to be emotive at that time because we're doing visualizations. I'm doing guided meditations. I'm taking you into your heart space. We're starting to feel more because now that we work with your mind, the mind is going to protect the heart. Even if your mind is telling you like crazy things, like you suck, whatever, it's actually protecting you. If you believe it or not, that's like one thing that I had to like wake up and realize. So once you actually start to give the mind an opportunity to just like calm, then your heart opens, then your inner child starts to express itself. So then we start to work with those patterns of your inner child. Then at the end of the 4 weeks, most of the people feel lighter, more empowered. I've had clients start their own businesses, completely change like their trajectory of their life, like just feeling lighter, feeling more open, finding joy, finding happiness, being able to find gratitude. Does it fix everything? No, because it's 8 weeks, but it does get you to a really like a more solid foundation to build on. And that's why, but you have to, it's got to be the 8 weeks. I tried to do it less and it just doesn't work.
yeah, for sure. That sounds like a pretty like robust program. Like you got me interested in it because like I think people just don't understand how much crap they have, how much baggage they actually have within them, right? And it's typically the reason that they feel like shit or they're just not getting to where they want to go in life. It's not, there's nothing really outside of you stopping you. It's typically always internal, right? And we say that
Mm-hmm.
a lot with business too. It's like there are no business problems. It's like there's personal problems that come up in the business, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like if you're stuck at that glass ceiling, like you need to actually look inside yourself and see like what is going on here. That's how am I hindering my own growth? So taking like ownership of like it's probably something with me, right? And being open to different things too. So one thing we do in our program is meditation, right? And for a normal fitness program, like you'd be like, why am I doing meditation, right? But the thing is, it helps so much with like the stress management and setting yourself up for success every single day, like routines, habits, things like that, are so big that they don't realize like, and I'm sure you probably see it too, like when people come to the program, it's like, well, just, I just need a meal plan and a workout guide. Just tell me what to
Mm-hmm.
do, right? And it's like, no, you need to fix your shit like
Mm-hmm.
internally, right? So I think, yeah, you definitely got something like super powerful there. Especially like it's going even deeper than I could ever go. So like, I'd probably even love to just try your program and see like what things uncover. Cause like, even like you talk about like your inner child is like in your head every single day. And it's actually the root of most of your issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that through therapy myself, like just figuring out who I am, like what did I go through as a kid that I look at and maybe I'm like, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it like something happens and I get triggered by it and I'm like, oh, it's
Yeah.
because of this actual thing that happened in my childhood, right? So it's just very important to like know who you are, be attached to nothing and open to everything is what I always say, just because
Yes.
yeah, a lot of people might be listening there and be like, man, this sounds like some witchcraft, crazy stuff. And it's like,
Right?
oh yeah, you gotta be open to it. You gotta try these things because it almost reminds me like I did ayahuasca in Colombia. And I know a lot of veterans there's really a push right now in the veteran community, and it's not like cleared by the VA or anything like that, but a lot of veterans are trying um things like ayahuasca and mushrooms and like hallucinogens to help get themselves into their subconscious and bring those things out. I've never done like anything like that where it's like a professional setting or anything. We did ayahuasca in Colombia. I wanted to try it. It was a good experience. I had a good experience. So I think there's a lot to be said behind these types of healing methods. And like you talked about, just giving people a pill like that isn't going to do it, right? We know that by now.
Yeah.
Um, So exploring some of these other options is definitely key. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
And I would also say too, breath work. Breath work is huge. So
Right.
that helped me a lot. So it's like meditation, but also breath work. So like doing deep belly breathing, doing breath of fire where you're like exerting, like you want your oxygenate, like you want to oxygenate your body because that actually will clear out a lot of things. So breath work is really huge. And then like you were saying, why ayahuasca and why things like mushrooms are so helpful is because what they do is they allow the ego death. So they allow a
Mm,
part of you to die without physically having to die. And they help, it's kind of like my power, my 8-week series, but it does it in a way that is really internal, and it helps you do that. So that's where like it would be really good to have assisted therapy with that so someone can guide you through that type of stuff too. But that's what I started to see that for me, when it came to healing my suicidal thoughts, I had to get real with myself and say, there is a part of me that I want to die. And so I can't, but there's also a part of me that wants to live. So how do I die and live at the same time? So that's where it's starting to recognize that certain pains and patterns and behaviors and energies I was done with. But no one in this world, in this society, teaches you how to let that go and to live a different way. Because it's like, once you're who you are, you're who you are. So
yeah.
that's when I started to realize, like, I don't have to be who I was all the time. I'm always evolving and changing. So
Right.
how can I allow those really painful pieces of me to be let go of and to die, but I still live? So that's a big thing when it comes to suicide that I recognize, especially with like my father and stuff. Like there's a part of me that's like, man, dude, you died too soon. Like, because there's so much more, like the world has opened up to certain things that
Mm,
he was trying to get involved in at that time, but it just kept hitting wall after wall after wall. Now, like, because he wanted to do ayahuasca and that type of stuff. Now it's kind of like,
mm.
okay, like, you
Right.
know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Way
So,
more.
but 10 years ago, it wasn't,
Yeah.
So it's like there's certain things and there wasn't a lot of talk. Like he would actually, if my dad was here, he would be like, wait, you guys are talking about this right now? Like he was actually spiritual. He was very
Right.
sensitive into things. So that's what I started to realize is sometimes a part of us, I want to emphasize that, a part of us does need to die or be let go of. But that's to give space for the life that also wants to be born there. So how do we do that without completely removing ourselves?
Right. And I think what you hit it on the head when you said death of the ego. Like, and for men especially, it's just so hard to let go of that ego because it's a thing that for men, it's like what we thrive off of, right? It gets us to from A to B, especially in the military. So
Mm-hmm.
um I've had to learn that too myself. And it's like I still have a big ego, and it's like if you can figure out how to set that aside in a lot of situations, and again, like I said, being attached to nothing and open to everything, that's letting go of the ego because your ego wants you to stay comfortable. Your ego wants you to not change. Like that's all the ego right there. So um can you talk about a little bit about like your father and his battle with depression and essentially just ultimately taking his own life? Do you feel like there was genetics played in that with you and your depression and your anxiety? Do you feel like it was just more environmental because of he was an alcoholic and you've seen things? Like, can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So my dad's life, he lost his brother when also, am I like glowing? I know I'm like interrupting, but like
No, you're
now,
good. There's
okay.
yeah, there's a
Cause
little
like,
light.
yeah,
uh
because now the sun's setting and where I'm sitting, I'm like, am I like just okay. But
no, you're
anyways,
good. It's not that
so
bad.
okay. So my dad lost his brother when he was 13. His brother died in a car accident. So he actually started drinking at 13.
Wow.
And we grew up in like a small town and like he never left really. Well,
Mm,
he did a little bit. He was actually in the Navy for a little bit too.
mm,
He was almost in Desert Storm but wasn't. So he never saw like combat, but he definitely was trained in a certain way.
Your dad
So
and your uncle were both veterans.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. And then I will put this out there just so my papa knows, he was in the Army Reserve. So he likes to, yeah, yeah. Um, so his brother died at 13, or when he was 13. So his brother was a lot older than him, died in a car accident, and I think that really set him off. And I didn't know too much about that, but I spent some time with my dad's friend after he passed, and he gave me a lot of insight into like when my dad started that whole journey. And then my dad's mom passed away when he was 28 of cancer. And so that was a big thing for him too. That really took a big toll on him. And my grandmother was this lovely, wonderful person, but I also growing up as I got older realized that she had some like issues with like bipolar a little bit too.
Mm.
So just looking at how that handed down, because it seemed like my dad's, it was definitely he struggled with alcoholism, but it also seemed like he would be in bouts of like really good hot like goods and then low lows. And so like that's kind of like the bipolar. I mean,
Right.
there's different types of bipolar, but he kind of had that.
Yeah.
So it was like interesting. And he did get help, but he struggled with the therapy part. That's why I really pushed this. He did the psychiatrist, he did acupuncture, he did things like that, but he struggled, I think, with the therapy and the talking part. So I definitely, especially because I have a podcast too, and I think I go into this in my second episode where I talk about my experience growing up, because I can see things and I'm like really sensitive. And so I actually started to see that at one point in my life, I even remember saying, I was 9 years old. I remember just seeing my dad being in so much pain and so much darkness that I even said out loud to the universe, give me some of that so he doesn't have to. And I'm getting chills now. So I was like, just give me some of his pain. And then that's when I got just really depressed and just really
Mm.
down. And I think
How
that
old
that
were
was
you?
9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then
Well,
it really
crazy to,
set in at 13.
and it's crazy to think that you were thinking like that at that age. I mean, my daughters, I have 2 daughters, one's 12 and one's 7, but just thinking like my 7-year-old having to think something like that, because of my state or whatever. So I think that just kind of shows you like how in tune you were, like you said, with your feelings at
Yeah.
very early age.
Yeah. And actually, too, there's so much we could talk about.
Yeah.
So from the first 7 years of your life, so I learned this in yoga. The first 7 years of your life, you're umbrellaed under your mother's energy. So
Mm,
everything she feels, you feel like you're just constantly connected. It's like there's an energetic umbilical cord. So
mm,
in a lot of other cultures at 7, that's when they go to a monastery or they go off to school or whatever it is. It starts at 7 because now you have your own auric field and your own energy field.
mhm.
So at 7, I started to realize like, this is not okay. Like I started to now my cat's messing with things. See, this is like now am I too dark?
Oh no, you're good. That's
Okay.
probably even better because you're not getting the glare.
The glare, yeah, because she's knocking everything over in the yeah. Okay. So at 7 is when I started to notice what was going on with my dad in a way, because I think I was being protected by my mom. And I
Mm,
remember the day too, I was watching Three Ninjas, and my dad got up and he was kind of like stumbling around, and I looked over at him, and it was like the first time that I realized like that's not my dad. But I never noticed it before then. You know what
mm,
I'm saying? So it was like, but then at 9, then I got super like, what is he doing? Where's he going? Like, cause then I started to realize like my dad leaves sometimes. Like I started to get fixated on it and it kind of became
mm,
OCD. So
mm.
I would even like count the beer cans and see like, I just became so fixated on it. And then that's when 9, I was like, let me take on some of that. And then that's when 13, with my hormone changing, because your body does change at that time, that I
Oh yeah.
think it almost activated what you're saying is that like DNA genetics, because
Mm,
certain genetics can be activated and we can
wow.
activate them. So
Wow.
I feel like some of that I took on, because then up until after my dad's passing, I struggled with anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. And it wasn't until after my dad actually passed that I decided I need to do something about this suicide, because I actually can now see what it's going to do to people. And
Mhm.
it's not the answer, at least in my opinion. So that's when I really started to see that there is a genetic thing going on here. And how can I work through this? Because I even noticed, like, in my brain, because I would sit a lot and meditate and like be in silence, I could actually notice, like, in the back of my brain, this like undeveloped part of me that just felt like where all my stuff was. And I'm like, is this how my dad felt? Like, because he would even say there's like a part of his brain that didn't feel like it could work right. And so I started to like notice that and then like talk to it differently instead of like resisting myself, asking myself, like, okay, well, what part of me, if my brain's not working, what other part of me do I need to activate instead? So that way that's when I started to kind of like realize like the heart and the heart opening that I was talking about. So I started to go into my heart space because I wasn't finding answers up in my brain. I was just finding more of the same things. So with my dad's stuff, I feel like he had a hard time with the heart stuff, going in and really like addressing that type of thing. And like I said, at the time, there wasn't a lot of tools or a lot of ways that were being talked about that you could do that. He tried, he did the meditation, he did those things, but ultimately for him, he said that he just felt like his brain wouldn't let him. And
Mm.
that's when I'm like, I'm going to create a program here to help people out of that space, because I got to do it for myself first. But yeah, so to answer you, I do believe that there is a genetic thing here and that it definitely was something that I adopted myself, and that the mental illness and how that gets passed down is very real. And it can also be activated and triggered by events too. Does that answer
That's
your
crazy.
question?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay.
I've never thought about it that way, that things can be activated like that. So that's a lot to think about. I'm like thinking about a lot of other things that could have been activated, and just definitely mind blowing. Um yeah, that's crazy. So, and that's, I wanted to just say, like, that's super cool that like your journey brought you to this place where it's like, okay, let me do what somebody else couldn't do for my dad, and let me help the people that were like my dad, and I think that's like your legacy. Like, you get to kind of, I mean, not make up for it, but like you get to take that battle on for yourself, and make your dad proud. So that's super cool.
Yeah, that's actually like what his gift is to me. And
Mhm.
I can't remember what episode of my podcast I really go into that realization that anything is a gift, So it's like, I mean, that death rocked me for years, and I was like, what do I get out of this? What am I going to get out of this? And I realized
Mhm.
that there was so much in that passing that he was giving me that was a gift that I can help myself and I can help other people. And sometimes souls decide to help each other that way. And sometimes that's what it is, because where he was at 10 years ago, I'm that, I call it inner alchemy. I'm that legacy for him of, I can do this. I can actually take the darkness and turn it into light. He was trying to, and now it's like I'm the next up. And here I am doing that. And it's like that's his gift, was to show me that and to invite me into my purpose. Because I feel like, in a way, if he hadn't had passed, I probably would be like a school teacher, married, maybe somewhere doing
Mhm.
something else that
Mhm.
my voice is needed in other areas. And I needed something to, sometimes we need big things to break us open to go on the path that we're supposed to be on. And that's, yeah, so I find it as a gift.
That's awesome, and that's exactly like what you're talking about, turning your pain into power.
Yeah.
Um, and it's about perspective. It's like, you could easily have just sit there and go, oh, I got all this stuff wrong with me when I was younger. Then my dad, commits suicide, and then my uncle dies, and like, you've been through some shit, and you don't sit there and go, oh, woe is me. You figure out how, what's the perspective on this? Like, why, not why is this happening to me, but what's the word I'm looking for? Like, um how do they say that? Where they're like, don't ask why it's happening to you, ask what it's preparing you for
Yes,
or
yeah,
something
what
like
is in
that.
this for me? Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, if you can have that perspective, that's just super huge. I wanted to ask you, and it's like if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to, but I feel like I've always kind of wanted to know because I've been fortunate enough to never really lose anybody like that. I've lost close friend. I've lost more friends than anything. I just had even a buddy that supposedly gun accident is what the family's saying, but I'm pretty sure it was suicide just like even just a few months ago. And my mourning process is just like at first it's like shocking. And I'm like, what and it just doesn't seem real. And then it's just like I just go on, right? It's not like and I sit there and think about them and things like that. I feel a little sad, but I don't it doesn't get me down in the dumps. I'm just kind of like, well, I guess that's just what it is, it's just like but again, I've been blessed to never have like knock on wood, like anything super close like that. So can you like talk about like what the mourning process was for you? Like what it was like the day after and then like where did you like at what point were you like because I could imagine I'd just be laying in bed for like 6 months, like not wanting to talk to anybody, not wanting to do anything. Like, what did that look like for you? If you don't mind sharing, if you do, like, it's cool too.
Yeah. Honestly, I've never been asked this, so I'm like trying to figure out how I did handle it. Um, so my dad was this was planned out for him for a while.
Mm,
So, I guess I can kind of talk about like the last day that I saw him. So I was feeling it for a while actually. I was checking in on him a lot. I could just tell he's starting to distance himself,
mm,
like just wasn't answering as much. I could just and intuitively I was like something is off. And I actually lived with him for a little while, so I was like really in tune with him. And then he started to get like distance again, and I was like, okay, he's either drinking or something's off, which it was both. And so um I had come back from school and I was in town for because Duquesne, you get an Easter break. And so I was on Easter break and it's only like 3 to 4 days. And I had reached out to him and I had asked him to take pictures with me and my brother because I was like, we don't have any recent photos and I just feel like there's a need for that.
mm,
Like, I want a photo with you. And so he said he would, and so he showed up, and it was my cousin was like is a really good photographer, and he's like super into that. So he took the photos, and so it was me, my brother, and my dad. And then I remember seeing him, and it's actually interesting that you're bringing this up because this is something that I've been working through the last few days too. Is like the last day that I saw my dad, and so the last day that I saw him, I was like hugging him. I was supposed to like go and bring him a book before I went back to school because I was leaving to go back to school the next day.
mm,
And he hugged me and I was like, I'll see you tomorrow. And he looked down and like looked away and was like, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Got into his car. I never saw him again.
mm.
But it was like 4 in the morning and
So when that happened, I don't mean to cut you off. When that
yeah,
happened, did you suspect anything at that? Because you said it was kind of coming like and in that moment, looking back in that moment, were you like, yeah, I could definitely tell like something was up, or was it just like, huh, I'm surprised I didn't catch that. What was that like?
honestly, I remember. So it was me, my cousin, and my brother, and we were going to go watch Game of Thrones after because that was like the big thing to do back then.
Yeah.
And so I was in the car with my cousin, and I think even my brother. No, I was with my cousin because we had to go meet my brother at his car. So it was just me and my cousin. And I looked over at my cousin and I was like, do you think he's going to be okay? As in, like, my dad. And my cousin looked at me and we looked at each other and we were silent for a moment. And we were like, he goes, I think so. And I'm like, I hope so. But we both could tell, but we didn't know, because you don't ever want to really think that that's really going to happen. So, but I did. I felt like weird and I couldn't like be calm. I didn't feel calm. So even when we were watching Game of Thrones, I remember too that the sunset was so weird. It was like so red. Like I've never seen a red sunset like that either. And all three of us, because he was close. My dad was really close with my cousin. And they were like really close because my cousin's older than me, like by several years. So like they were like close in that way. So my brother and my cousin were like, this is like a really red sunset. Like we've never seen anything like this. So I felt like something was off, but this is the big thing. So I was staying at my mom's house, and my mom and my dad were separated. They never got divorced. They just separated because he would drink and that type of stuff. So at 4 a.m, my mom's phone rang, and I woke up, and all I heard, and I just knew immediately. I just knew, like, because she said, like, I guess my uncle had called her saying that there were cops going by our house because there was someone who had called them saying that they were going to take their life. So my dad did all of it. Like my dad had it all figured out. It was almost like, this is what I mean. Like he had decided this for a long time, like probably months, and he had it all. Like, so no one found him. He had called the cops. He told them where to find him, all those things. So, but at 4 a.m. is when I knew, and I just knew. I don't know how how else to explain it. I just knew because everyone was like, no, like they're going to find him. They're going to stop him. I was like, it's over. I just knew. Like I'm such an energetic person that like I started to kind of like reach out to see where his energy is, and it wasn't there. And so I could just kind of tell. So that part was like a big shock. And so there was just a numbness. I would say I was numb for 3 months. I mean, I cried initially, like when you see your parents and my brother and like that type of stuff, there was like the initial reaction. But after that, it was like a little bit there. Actually, my best friend, I called her, and she even remembers, and she brings it to this day. She said that I just sounded so monotone. And I just straight up was like, my dad died today. This is what happened. Like there was no emotion. There was nothing. And I remember that I shut down and I closed off. So because for me, it's hard to explain it because no one really, my mom and my aunt kind of get it now because I lost my grandma last year. So like that's their mom. So they kind of had an understanding of what that felt like. But when you lose a parent, it's hard to explain. It's like like rocks your world. Like you don't know how to understand it because this is the person that's been around your whole life. Like you're made from this person. This person made you. So it's like you know that it could happen because they're told, but you don't know how to accept it. So I had a hard time accepting it for a while, but the biggest thing that really helped me was, like I said, my spirituality, to be real, and my belief and my faith in just a higher power. And so my dad used to tell me, because his mom passed away. So when we would hang out, my dad would say that anytime he ever saw a hawk, he felt like it was his mom. And he had a lot of like serendipitous moments throughout his life with hawks. There's this one time he told me he was taking a hike, and this hawk was on this tree with its like wings wide open, and he talked to it for a while, and then as if it was his mom. And then after he stopped talking, it put its wings down like it was like out hugging him. And then as soon as he was done, it like flew away. And so, and there was like different times like that he had said things like that. So it was me by myself for a moment on the day that he passed. And I looked up at the sky and I said, just send me a hawk so I know you're okay. So the crazy thing is numbness. No, I can't cry. Like I actually remember telling my cousin like to look at me and tell me that my dad was gone, because I couldn't, like my brain couldn't connect the dots. It's like he's just somewhere else. So it was me and my brother by ourselves, and we were sitting together, and we were outside, and this hawk comes in, and it swoops down over us, and it circles over us like 3 times, and then it flies away. And then I looked at my brother and I go, that was dad. And I said, send me a hawk. So that was the day that he passed. And that helped me to recognize and realize he's not gone. And so it gave me some type of faith in like essence, in the higher power, in the earth, in the universe, like whatever you want to call it. But After that, like I said, I got really numb. I do remember having this one really big tantrum when I got back to school because I'm like 6 hours away from where I grew up. So it was me by myself. I had this like tantrum, just like overwhelming tears, crying, just like shaking body. It's like my body was finally allowing it to feel that. So once that happened, I started to feel a little bit better. I did do like therapy. I started to do like yoga, meditation, like that type of stuff. I started working at the Ayurveda Center, which helped me a lot. But for a while, I felt really dark. I felt really misunderstood. None of my friends really understood. I was in a sorority at the time. They
Mm.
sucked about it, to be honest. Like they were not good about it at all. Even remember like asking them to like light candles online, like you could light candles. And the president of the sorority at the time was like, yeah, if you BTW, not even by the way, BTW, if you want to light a candle for Sid's dad, you can. And I just kind of was like, you're supposed to be my Sid's sisters. This is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, they
So
should have.
it just woke me up to so many things, though, is how
Mhm.
I started to process it. It like opened my eyes and it woke me up. And I started to realize so many things. And I started to realize who my true friends are, who was really there for me, who the real ones were, helped me and my brother get closer. It's definitely a process. And um it gets better because I've like created a relationship with him even in his passing that I feel is actually better than when he was alive.
Mm.
And now I get frustrated, I guess I'll say, because like I just turned 30 this year and I cried on my birthday because my dad wasn't there.
Mm.
And it's like it's the first decade that my dad isn't in my life because he was in my life. He died right before I turned 21. So he was
Mhm.
like kind of in that, but it's like now I just feel like I'm getting farther away from him. So I get a little bit of frustration of great, I'm probably going to cry at big events for the rest of my life. Like I don't even want to know what I'm going to be like on my wedding, you know? So
Right.
those pieces, I just know that I'm prepared for, but the the mourning process I think will be different for everyone, but I took it head on. I decided to take it head on and it helped me to find my purpose. It helped me, like I said, it became a gift because I was like, if you're gone, I got to figure out how to stay. You know, I got to figure out what I can do with this. And that's even what he said to me in his letter is you could use this to become a victim or mostly I hope that you use this to rise. And so I chose to rise. Um but I think that it'll probably be different for everyone, but I definitely did hit a big depression for a while. And then I would say because I try to tell people it doesn't really hit until 5 years, actually. It takes a little bit.
Oh,
Because the
wow.
first year, you're just trying to get used to that they're not there. The second year, you're like, all right, they're not here. Third year, you're like, all right, they're really not here. Fourth year, you don't really think about it weirdly. Like I did, but I didn't. Fifth year started to make more sense. And then after that, it's gotten a little bit better. But I still have breakdowns every once in a while about it. Like I've actually just cried the other day about the last time I saw him and how I realized that you get stuck in emotional patterns. That's actually a big thing to talk about. Is you get stuck in emotional patterns, and I'm gonna have to turn my light on. But you get stuck in emotional patterns that you're not always aware of. So, for example, you're getting a lot of truth out of me, by the way.
I
Um,
love it. I
yeah,
appreciate
it's like it's a lot. So I realized the other day that I'm stuck in this emotional pattern, kind of like the last time I saw my dad when he looked at me and he was like, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, knowing that he wasn't and like never seeing him again. That cycle for 10 years has just continued to play out for me with my relationships with men. It's
it.
like they tell me that they're going to see me, like they're going to be there. And then all of a sudden, like they don't talk to me, they ghost me or whatever it is. And then I relive that emotional cycle. And
Mm.
so I was like, I'm pretty cool. So I don't know why these guys are doing this to me. So it's got to be something else here. So where's the root of this? And
Mm.
that's when I started to realize that the root of it is I was staying in that emotional pain cycle with my dad because that's the last time that I saw him. So if it's like I'd rather feel the pain than have nothing of him at all anymore. And then now I'm really realizing that I don't need the pain
Mm.
anymore, because that pain is not my dad. That pain is just creating more emotional pain in my life. So my dad, I can't get back, and I don't need to perpetuate the pain of that anymore. And so I need to recognize and realize, kind of like the hawk showed me, where else is he going to show up, and be more open to that love rather than getting stuck in these emotional patterns and cycles.
So in regards to the men in your life, do you feel like it was like a self-sabotaging thing? Like, oh, another man hurt me, which was my father. And so like I just expect the other men to
Yes.
hurt me. Well, yeah.
Yeah. And it was subconscious in a lot of
Hmm.
ways too.
Yeah.
But there is a deep part of me that's like, if a man tells me that who he cares about me and he's going to be in my life, I'm like, until when? Like, like there's an
Mhm.
expiration date, because I've seen it. So
Right.
that's what I'm starting to finally see. I still do my own work. That's where I'm now dealing with that intensity of, how do I get out of that emotional cycle, which I'm starting to get away from.
Yeah, no, and that's huge because it's like, because it's your work, it doesn't mean that you're perfect. It means that you have the tools and the capabilities to know how to work through those things when you recognize them, and being able to recognize them.
It's like, I would say it's probably going to be different for everyone, but it definitely is something that's going to hit you like a brick. And I say you move through it the best that you can. And you just, in a way, I started to realize that I must have a lot of love inside of me,
Why is that?
because the grief just shows how much the love was there. So it just showed me how much I love him, and how much I loved being with him and around him and having him in my life, even within the struggle. Because there were certain times that I would even say, like, when I was like a teenager, like, especially when I was drinking and stuff, like I would say things like, he's my dad, not my, or he's my father, not my dad, or like these types of things. And I just look back on that stuff like, ego is bullshit. Like, it really made me realize that, like, the ego, I'm hurt because of, I wanted him to see me then and stuff, but it just made you realize so many different things. And it just taught me that the only true power and the only thing that really is there ever is love. And I just love him. And so how do I keep that alive in my life? And sometimes that is going to be with the grief. Grief and love are best friends. And so I read this poem that's like, when someone that you care about really passes away and dies, you pull up a chair and you name it grief, because grief's going to be there. It's going to be your best friend from here on out. So you might as well welcome it and let it
Hmm.
sit at the table. So that's what I
Interesting.
tried to do.
Wow. That's that's an interesting take. I appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing, because it's like, I know that stuff's not easy to talk about, and I've always been curious, so I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's important to share this type of stuff now, because we're all human, like experiencing it, and we just, the society just says, keep going, like get to work, wake up, eat, whatever. And it's like, there's so much more going on here. So for a while, I was nervous about sharing my personal experience, but the only thing that I know and that what I've seen is by sharing my personal experience, it gives people permission to have their own. And then that's when true healing happens.
100%. So big takeaways, guys, from this is obviously turning that pain into power, doing the work on yourself to be able to have those tools and resources that you're going to need, like no matter what, even if you don't have PTSD, even if you haven't lost a loved one, like life is hard. So, you know, letting go of the ego, being willing to work on yourself, investing in yourself. These are all things I preach every single day, because at the end of the day, you got people depending on you, you got people counting on you. So if you're not trying to improve yourself, you're not going to be able to improve anybody else's lives if yours is all jacked up. So, um, with that being said, I appreciate you coming on, Sydney. It's been even better than I thought it would be. So, you're my first
Good.
guest, yeah, on the
Yeah.
podcast. So
Wait,
it's been,
before you wrap up, because I feel it coming, I just want to let people know you can buy my book. I give a lot of really great tools. I know we've been
yeah,
talking for a while, but like,
right. No,
seriously.
yeah, no, that was the other thing I wanted to touch on too. So first of all, like, where can people find you? Instagram handles, websites, anything like that. And then also, yes, go check out her book. What was the title again? Sorry.
It's called Cleanse Your Energy, and you can
Cle-
get it on Amazon or you can get it on my website. You can get the e-version on my website. There's also a link to Amazon on my website too, which is Inner Element Wellness. My website, you'll find my Ayurveda services. You can come and see me for Ayurveda services. I can do the Ayurvedic wellness virtually. I can't do the body work virtually. I can do some of the Ayurveda like wellness coaching virtually. And then also really I can totally do the 8-week series virtually. So if anyone's interested in that, like it's one of my favorite things to do right now with people actually. So you can get my 8-week series, the sessions that is on my website. You can find more information about that. That's on Inner Element Wellness. Like I said, Cleanse Your Energy. And then I do have a podcast where I talk a lot like I did here with you in other ways, like about my experiences and stuff. And it's called The Goddess and the Medicine Woman. And it's more spiritual based, more like energetic focused.
Mm,
But that would be a good place if you're just looking to hear more about like this type of thing.
That's awesome. I'm definitely gonna subscribe to the podcast. Can you talk about the book a little bit and just like some kind of the key takeaways? Like
Yeah.
not obviously, yeah, just
Yeah.
what the book's about.
Yeah. So Cleanse Your Energy is a book that just helps you identify what I was talking about, that energy body. So like beyond the mental body, like what is our energy and like where is the energy body? How can you notice it? What things clog it up? What things create those triggers, that heaviness, talks about the mindset, talks about gratitude, talks about intention. And then I give you my top 7 ways that I use to cleanse my energy. Because if we consistently practice cleansing our energy, we get to know who we are. And that's what I was like talking about outside of the mental patterning. So I just basically tried to create a really easy, practical guide that outlines how to get you there, then give you the 7 ways, which you're going to look at them and be like, oh, these are really simple. But yes, they are. So it's going to be like nature, but how to spend time in nature, breath work. I give a lot of exercises, visualizations, meditations. There's a quiz in there to see where your energy's at. There's a lot of good quotes. I do have resources in there to other people's services that I find would be helpful and supportive. My information's in there for like my website. And I just really hope that people utilize it as a way to start to help them identify their energy body, to move through those. And it's just very simple ways to do that. And then I'm coming out with a Cleanse Your Energy 21-day transform your mindset journal it's kind of like with the book that will actually like take you through some steps too.
Nice.
So
That's
yeah,
awesome. Doing big things. I like to see that. That's great. So they can
thanks.
get the book on Amazon, right? Can they get it on Audible? It's probably not on Audible, right?
No, it's not on Audible yet. Just the paperback is on
Okay.
Amazon.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Yeah, so pick that book up, guys. I'll definitely probably be picking up a copy myself. And again, appreciate you coming on, Sydney. Like it's been, like I said, you're doing better than I thought. So again, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be your